Hey all, we'll be getting started in just a moment. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Bear with us a moment. My co-presenter is having a little bit of technical difficulty joining. Hi all, sorry for this slow start here. My co-presenter, Mike Monegan, is still sorting out some issues he's having with Zoom. But in the meanwhile, we will get started. First of all, I hope everyone can see my screen okay. I've also enabled my video. And we're really excited to talk to you about migrating your conversational IVR to the cloud. We think this is a fantastic subject. We think it's very timely for the customers and for the market. We see so much activity out there related to this. And we really want to just talk to you about what we're seeing, the sort of trends, generally speaking, and then specifically what we're seeing as bespoken. And I guess I should start off by saying I'm John Kelvie. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bespoken, and we just wanted to start the session off with a quick poll. You'll see the polls in the Zoom section down there. And if you have a chance, please do answer those questions. And really, just to kind of level set to start out, we wanted to know how you're running your contact center today. So do take a look at that and let us know. We definitely appreciate the feedback. It helps us to tailor this webinar as well as to really understand this market better. So in terms of the contact center, it's to start out to really talk about what is the state of the contact center as a service, commonly referred to as CCaaS, which I think many of you may be familiar with. Where is it in 2022? And so first of all, talking about what CCaaS is, it's really at the intersection of a number of different innovations, foremost of which I would say are the cloud and AI, but also some of these Web 2 pieces around integrating lots of different data together, as well as bringing in extensive customer data from systems like Salesforce and other CRMs. We've seen the demand for CCaaS really grow over time, and these implementations are quite sticky. They are bringing in customers, and I see Mike there is an attendee, so I'll invite him to join. But once customers have moved to the cloud, it really is bringing them a lot of traction. There's big players that are converting their existing implementations, which is a huge move, and there's a lot of different ways that they're doing that, different strategies. And then there's these interesting micro trends, we would say, within it, that are closely adjacent and of great interest to us and what we do at Bespoken, which is the shift to conversational AI, as well as the adoption of an omni-channel approach for managing customer interactions. And we think that those two micro trends in talking about conversational AI and omni-channel, they can really bring significant benefits for customers. And that's really where we as Bespoken come in to help customers. Our core competency is testing, training, and monitoring for voice and chat. But we like to think that we provide more than just tools. We also see ourselves as really offering guidance and expertise, and hopefully, helping our customers to truly be successful. That's really our North Star. And this expertise, it comes in a few forms. One, we really try to advocate picking the right use cases when you're looking at conversational AI. We think there's lots of things one might do in the contact center with bots, but not all of them are the best applications. So it's really important to pick a good application. Additionally, managing the AI software lifecycle We have a lot of expertise with that. We have a lot of insight into how to do it best. And, we really try to help our customers, provide as much expertise and insight as we can, and help them effectively manage that life cycle throughout the life of their application. And then lastly, an area where we really try to help our customers and add a lot of value is careful and methodical vendor selection. There's an immense amount of innovation in this space. There's a lot of different offerings that are out there. Some of them are better than others. And perhaps most importantly, one of the points we like people to take away is depending on your use case, some of them are better than others. So you don't want to just look at it like, oh, Google's the best, or IBM's the best, or Amazon's the best. Each one of them has its virtues. And depending on what you're trying to do, you may find that they're the right choice to solve a specific problem. And that doesn't mean you should use them for all of your problems. You may be looking at a hybrid approach overall. So those are some of the key points in terms of how we try to help our customers. And I think, Mike, hopefully you're online and can hear me.
Can you hear me, John?
Yep.
Great. I really apologize. Zoom was just not allowing me in as a panelist, but thank you for upgrading me from an attendee. So yeah, happy to comment on as we go forward with the next slide. Let me just chime in as somebody who's been in the contact center space. A little introduction on me. I've been in contact center space since 2003. All that time doing conversational speech, but this movement to the cloud is something that is a kind of once in a lifetime change for a lot of contact center space folks, and what it is it's liberating because the scalability and the flexibility of cloud-based technology has been instrumental, I think, in allowing people to respond to quick changes in their operating context, and the biggest change is by far the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we saw a big run up. I think we've moved from not just the early adopters, but now the early majority is really getting into proven usage of the contact center. It's basically at about the 1/3 mark, and we're going to just see a lot of folks not just crossover into using the cloud, but find strategic advantages on doing things they never could have done or would have done with their premise or their private cloud contact centers.
Yeah, I would say from where I said that we would agree that it's moving into that early majority. And we would emphasize that for that early majority, getting wins with their initial applications is really huge. We see customers where they're sort of almost in this sliding doors type situation, which without dating myself too much, that was a movie that starred Gwyneth Paltrow that came out some years ago, where the basic premise was in one version of her life, she got on a train and her life took one course, which was very happy. And then the other one, she missed a train and it didn't turn out quite as well. And we see for customers, if they can get early wins with their applications of conversational AI, that they're getting on that train and they're going on that path to success. That's allowing them to then get more and more wins. And seeing an increased ROI as well as seeing expanded investment into conversational AI. At the same time, we've also seen, with those early projects, which can often be quite visible, have high-level executive sponsorship that's watching closely. If it doesn't turn out as well as people would hope for, you may be looking at missing that train and missing some of those opportunities. One example that we would highlight from our experience is our work with Epcor, which is a utility company based out of Canada. They did a self-service implementation for outage reporting. It just went really fantastic. And we played an instrumental role in that, which we'll go into more detail on later. But in that highly visible initiative, being able to show that it was high accuracy, that it had a high level of customer satisfaction, and that there was a really high ROI on it, that set them off to the races. And at that point, there's just a lot of really opportunities for these conversational applications to bloom. And that in turn, that cements and accelerates the adoption of the technology for those customers. And I think it pushes it onto other customers because they're hearing about those success stories, and then they're looking at how they can bring it to their own organization.
So, John, I wanted to chime in here on this growth rate of 3% a year, right? Cloud migration, and I think it's a little more lumpier than this because of the pandemic. But I think it's really critical for everyone to realize that it's okay to be in the final 2/3, right? There's a lot of change ahead as well as behind. But I think for those who actually migrated, I would expect that the 1/3 that has migrated, that are in these stacks of cloud CCaaS adopters, right? That pink band is getting bigger and bigger every year. But the ones that went recently, we definitely have observed a trend of kind of a lift and shift, and just get what I have going more or less working in the cloud, maybe even simplify it a little. But the real opportunities in the cloud in terms of the kinds of services that you can weave into your solution, make for transformations still really happening. Movement to the cloud is just the beginning of an up-leveling of the conversational speech capabilities, for example, and a number of other economies and changes that for example, the omnichannel trend you mentioned earlier. People embracing omnichannel is happening because they're in the cloud. They would have not done it had they not done the migration. So I think the interesting part is the 1/3 is like really kind of finding a home and an ability to up level. And while the 2/3 is still doing the study of when and how to go to the cloud.
Yeah, I would agree with that observation. And in terms of what we perceive is what's going to ensure that more cloud-centric reality plays out over time, and that we see those other 2/3 adopting it. Well, we think a lot of it really comes down to people that are like yourself that are on this call. It is about getting those early wins. It's about picking the right use cases and vendors. And we hope it's also about working with vendors such as ourselves, that can provide great services and be, great partners as these, quite significant migrations take place.
So these guys are a reasonably stable set. John, feel free to chime in, but my industry perspective on this is that a lot of these names have been around for a while. Notably, InContact got bought by NICE. It became NICE InContact. They rebranded their offering to CX1. These guys have been around for almost 2 decades, right? So some of this stuff, this technology is just got invented last week. But a lot of this stuff has been around for quite a while, and is a decade old. Amazon Web Services, was kind of launching Amazon Connect, but that was an internal endeavor that they started for their internal agents, and that technology is 20 years old. So there are a number of very mature players in this space that have been around for quite a while and are stable offerings. But I'd be curious, John, what you see as evolving and changing with these recent entries, kind of latecomers to the market.
Yeah, I mean, we do see this. This slide sort of highlights the critical nature of vendor and tool selection. We were interested to see this information come out from Gartner. We think to some extent it reveals who some of the pretenders are versus some of the more substantial ones. For example, Amazon is on here, perhaps not as far to the right as they would like, but I think anyone who has looked at what they're doing with Connect can really see their commitment to the space and their commitment to putting out a really full-fledged CCaaS and conversational AI offering. On the other hand, and I saw this noted on LinkedIn and Twitter and a few places, someone like Google is not on here. And Mike, as you noted in the slide here, that they did do this integration with UJet, which they announced recently. And I think that that was an interesting announcement. I think it showed the pressure that they have to bring a whole platform to market, in a true CCaaS offering. But at the same time, not enough commitment to actually build it themselves or even acquire UJet. And I think that shows, for one thing, the fact that Google is a little bit daunted to build their own offering shows, that somebody even with their resources doesn't necessarily want to take it on, I think says a lot. It is quite an undertaking. And I think it also brings up the question that I think any customer or implementer needs to be thinking about, which is who are the vendors who are really going to be committed to the space? Who are the people that you can make these sort of strategic bets on? We think that that's really a critical question.
Switching to the AI side of the conversation, there's many more vendors here, and my experience is that these charts from Gartner, Magic Quadrant charts change much more rapidly in this space. There's a lot of new players, a lot of shifting investments, a lot of big investments happening, and so we expect people to be popping up, moving to the right, dropping back. Losing the lead because the bar for what you have to do to compete is also changing and advancing. But definitely there's a group of folks here that are very general purpose, sometimes almost too general purpose, to do an awesome job with conversational AI. And then there's other folks that are very contact center specific, but are perhaps too narrow and just chatbot focused or something like that. But the fact that this extreme vendor diversity picture appears on this scatter chart basically suggests that it's still very early days, and that a single vendor is very tough to commit to because they're almost guaranteed not to be able to do everything well.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something from my perspective that we see as quite a pronounced trend. And we were rather delighted to see this come out from Gartner. Similar to the previous slide, it highlighted some of the observations that we were making to customers, but I think, Gartner perhaps in many people's eyes speaks with more authority than we do. And we've seen similar sort of information come from IDC as well as Forrester. And one of the things that we liked about this was, for example, where IBM is placed. IBM is a technology provider that we quite like at Bespoken. And we like the fact that it does also kind of highlight that maybe Google and Amazon are not quite as mature as some of their adoption would suggest. And that's not, I don't want to look like I'm just taking swipes at Google. We're not, but, because like if you compare IBM and Google, for example, does Google have the most innovative AI? I think the answer to that might be yes. I mean, that's a little bit difficult of a question to answer. But I think most people perceive them as having more advanced AI models than IBM. But the other side of it is IBM has this really customer tested tooling. So it's not just about the models, it's also about the tooling that surrounds it and the sort of flexibility that it provides to customers. And then there's also, and this is the thing that we kind of harp on, maybe excessively, there's how does it work for your specific use case? I mean, we say this because it's what we offer, that we will help you figure out what works best for your use case as Bespoken. But but it's our experience in working with conversational AI and working with speech recognition that you really do need to think about not just a generic benchmark, which you will see many of, and you'll see lots of different results on generic benchmarks. You need to benchmark it for your specific application. And that's something that we think is critical, and that's something as bespoken that we really try to help people with and provide expertise and guidance on. And I should also add, something that we have a track record of demonstrating high impact with that expertise and guidance. We have another poll here. I don't know if folks have answered the other one, but there's a lot of amazing innovation on the AI side of things. We'd love to hear about what you find is most useful and applicable for your business.
I think in terms of the commentary we prepared today, right? I think there's three really notable areas of application of AI in the contact center, right? One is natural language based routing. Another one is applying conversational speech to self-service, meaning allowing people to get stuff done without having to wait to talk to an agent. These things are things that have been worked on for decades in the IVR space. It's only been a few years with chatbots. I think the quality of the chatbots that I interact with, John, suggests that we've got a long ways to go with chatbots. But these are areas, right, where the bespoken team, right, you've got lots of great exposure on kind of the how far people have been able to go in applying AI technology to speech interaction. I just make the high level comment that the fact that full conversations, 20-minute conversations between two human beings are being transcribed at high accuracy now, and a bunch of call center automation products. I think while maybe not specifically germane to conversational AI because it's a passive technology, it really is generating a lot of broad investment in natural language recognition rates being much more accurate, and you can just see a lot more speakers for whom English is not their primary language, and just broad set of accents being recognized these days. And it has to do with the huge amount of data that's being used to tune, conversational speech these days. So it's really exciting days to see it actually working after many years of it almost working.
Yeah, and I think some of the sort of rough entry with chatbots, or sort of some of the rough early implementations, I think it does come back to really picking those right use cases. We did early on see a lot of FAQ bots, which we don't think is the right place to start. An FAQ for a system might have hundreds, if not thousands, of intents in it. That is not an easy thing to manage. It's no matter what your level of sophistication is or how long you've been working with these platforms, and it's certainly not a great place to start. We tend to recommend use cases that are less open-ended, that typically involve fewer steps to start out. And with that, you get early wins to build momentum. Another way we like to think about it is an organization, and this is a very AI-centric way of thinking about it, but they might have thousands of intents, of actual underlying intents that their customers want them to help them with. And so your job is not to try to immediately push those all onto the self-service or the AI, but to pick out the intents that are highest value, that are best suited to the technology, and get those in place. And then think of it as a steady territorial expansion, that over time, you're growing that landmass that's able to be handled via self-service. It's not going to happen in a single big bang. If you do that, I think it's much more likely that you'll end up in kind of a full retreat and not not really capture any territory, but instead this sort of steady territorial expansion of intents, we think that customers can be extremely successful and build it out in a thoughtful and methodical and fairly easily manageable way. And this does lead to the part of the deck that looks a little bit like a pitch from me. Hopefully it doesn't feel too much like that. But since it's our webinar, we do want to make sure that you know what we do at Bespoken. And you know, what we offer at our core, as I mentioned before, is testing, training, and monitoring for voice and chat. But we see ourselves as not just providing these tools, but also a framework for managing conversational AI across the entire life cycle. And this starts out on the left side with gathering data, which comes in the form of utterances and test cases. We in turn evaluate these in terms of the quality, scalability, and accuracy of the system. And we do this via functional testing, usability testing, and load testing. And then on the right-hand side, the training, this is a natural outgrowth of that testing, where we see different weaknesses, potentially in the accuracy of the ASR and NLU models. We do this training to really enhance those models and improve them. Once that part of the cycle is done, typically things are launched into production. And from there, you know, the monitoring is just critical. And it's monitoring in terms of making sure that the system continues to behave correctly. So that can be functional monitoring, monitoring in terms of making sure there's no outages or availability issues. And then lastly, monitoring in terms of what the actual users are interacting with and the ongoing accuracy of the system and the ongoing performance of it in terms of understanding people. We think that's really critical. All of that information is then fed back into that gathering stage so that that cycle can be repeated again. And that repetition, that iterative aspect of that is something we would really highlight and emphasize. It is something that is different about conversational AI versus web and mobile development. You know, when people are going into production with a conversational AI system, we really try to encourage folks to look at it. You know, this is a starting point, not an ending point. And how you take it from there, that's to us what really is going to distinguish between real success versus you know, potentially the failure of a project. As you see real users interacting, there's almost always some amount of adjustments that need to be made. And by staying close and keeping really a close eye on what those early customers are doing, that's what's really going to allow you to capture the maximum gain in terms of customer satisfaction and the ROI for these initiatives. Overall, we do like to think of this as the process of raising your AI from infancy to adulthood. And it's not a process that takes 18 years, but it may take 18 months. And that's the sort of level setting we like to do. And we think if you approach it that way, you're far more likely to be successful and have a really great outcome for your users.
John, let me just chime in and say, you know, the 5 years you've invested in Bespoken and the 4.5 years I invested in Ciara, I think it allows me to say at the highest level, all of this is professional grade automation. That's the value proposition is automation, right? If you can manage to test the reliability and the quality of a customer experience, you know, every so many minutes around the clock, right? You're not doing that with human beings, right? You're doing that with a system that allows you to express very crisply what is acceptable and what unacceptable is. And the system at its core is, you know, a way to automate the virtual customer interactions, the functional testing, the load testing, the huge number of interactions you need to do the training loop. All of that is fundamentally, you know, a very specialized system for, you know, simulating virtual customers or automating customer interactions, and that's you know, really the way to think about what Bespoken offers. I think probably the majority of the market does these things, or will have to do these things, and the normal competition is not even scripts or homebrew technology that does this stuff. Kind of general purpose scripting or something like that. It's usually lots and lots of manual time and shortcutting quality. So you no longer have to shortcut quality with this automation, and you test things thoroughly, all the functional paths, all of the different variants, conversational variants, test all the time, because automation makes that cheap and affordable and reliable.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's that premise sort of underlies so much of what we say and do. I probably sometimes breeze past it, but it's really that that need for automation. That's what brought me into this market. It was really the genesis behind Bespoken, because I was building speech recognition systems for some time, and I just I was doing it as a CTO, and I was spending 95% of my time testing. There was probably a small amount of manual testing I did, but pretty quickly you realize, like, you can't even put a dent in what's needed with manual testing. I mean, even with the best possible efforts, even with the sort of the most diligent type of person, and I'm not someone who really loves doing manual testing, but even someone far more who loves manual testing far more than me, you couldn't even get close, because you might have data sets in the thousands and the tens of thousands, and you're obviously not going to do that manually. So that need for automation, we see it, as Mike was saying, is going hand in hand with the adoption of AI. And this is a poll. I don't know if everyone who's on this webinar will have an opinion on this, but typically, folks who come to us as potential customers they have one or more specific pain points, maybe around functional testing that's being done manually and it's phenomenally tedious, or measuring and training their models, monitoring. Usually there's some specific pain point. And yeah, we would love to hear from you, what your pain points are. And I should also add, like, we're showing that slide with this overall life cycle. We do really believe that's the life cycle you should be thinking about. That's what it's the job of somebody building for conversational AI to manage. At the same time, doing all of it at once is not necessarily the approach. We work with a lot of customers. They start with one aspect of it, and you build towards these other pieces. You layer in the automation over time. We do think that that's critical. We don't think a big bang works for pushing out these AI solutions. We also don't think it's the best approach for DevOps. So we did want to talk a little bit about a case study that I alluded to earlier. This was for EPCOR, the Edmonton Power Company. And this is one, we really like, because it's like a lot of the best use cases that we see. It's pretty simple. It still had some challenges, but it ended up in a big win. And it also was something where we, as Bespoken, objectively made a big contribution. And so they were looking to put together a self-service system to handle outage reporting, for them as a power company. So the customers could call in and say, I have an outage. Sounds simple, and it sounds like something that could certainly be automated. And when we started with them, they were at this point where they had, this is kind of a common starting point that we see with our customers. There was a big question mark around their project from some of the higher level executive sponsors who were saying, it doesn't feel like this thing really works. And a big question mark about whether or not it could really go live. So we were sort of looked to as like, you guys come in and make sure that it can. in about a month. And the question marks were, sort of manifold. I mean, there's questions about the quality, not a lot there, but, wanted to make sure that there was really comprehensive functional testing that had been done. There's question marks about the scalability, because one of the great things about this, but also one of the things that was a little bit daunting, was this was, I mean, the thing about these power outages is there's nothing, and then there's a lot of callers all of a sudden, potentially. And so that's a hard thing to manage with employees, real live human agents. It's also something that can be difficult to manage with technology, because you've got to make sure you're ready for that spike. And then finally, there was a question mark about the accuracy. Edmonton, which we learned well, Bespoken, has a lot of street names that are all numbers. So you end up with street addresses like 111 11th Street, which are not easy for speech recognition or for NLUs. So we came in, we did functional testing and helped them identify some critical bugs in a short period of time. We did load testing, and with that, identified some critical bottlenecks that unlocked more than a 6x throughput increase, and ensured that they could hit what they forecasted as the top number of concurrent callers. And then most importantly, I would say in the eyes of this customer, we helped them to reduce the speech recognition errors by nearly 50%. And this really had a huge impact, taking that speech recognition up to higher than 90% accuracy, close to 95%, really gave them confidence that this was going to be able to launch and really work for their customers, which it did. And this is a case where by having that launch in what we think is a great use case, I mean, it is pretty simple. People call up. Sometimes it already knows the address. If it doesn't know it, it asks for the address. And then it just says, are you reporting a power outage? And they basically say yes or no. It's not a complicated self-service bot. It's not one with lots and lots of steps. It's not trying to offer you a mortgage or something like that. But it's, it's high value for this customer. It's a mission critical use case, in fact. And it gets them excited, and it points to other areas where they could then go, and apply conversational AI further. So if we kind of go back to thinking about that sort of sliding door, this is a customer that really was able to get on that train and have that early success that allowed them to sort of get to the next stage, in their adoption cycle. And we love to see that. And we see that with other customers. We're proud of the part that we played as Bespoken in helping them to get to that. And so then, just to kind of wrap up here, the sort of key takeaways we wanted people to have from this, one, we want to talk about sort of this overview around what's happening with the contact center and the migration to the cloud, and then also emphasize how to get these sort of initial wins in those implementations. And just, to summarize, and hopefully this doesn't feel too repetitive, but it's about getting the right use case, getting the right tool for the job, and it may be more than one tool. It doesn't have to be just one. We are, and I think we'll explore in future webinars more around the hybrid architecture that we're big advocates of. But then also, testing and measuring that is just critical to success.
I think we want to open it up to any questions that are out there for any attendees. Does anybody have anything that they want to post as a question? Otherwise, I have a few questions for you, John.
I am looking here. I don't see any questions at the moment, but feel free to add them into the Q&A section or in the chat window.
Yeah, I'll just chime in because I've been hearing about conversational AI applications that are being done in a kind of a single vendor environment, and then we had the two different magic quadrants. And there's obviously another play which is choose one vendor from the CCAS column and another vendor from the conversational AI column, and do your chatbots and IVR perhaps with them. Because there's what's working out there, John, right? You get exposed to a lot of implementations, and of course you guys get brought in and have lots of experience with folks that need help, essentially. So where are people succeeding and where are people falling down in this spectrum of using one vendor versus using multiple vendors?
I mean, so I like that question a lot. It is something that you and I talk about quite a bit, Mike. Hopefully without jumping too into the weeds, we like an intent-centric approach to adopting these tools. From one specific use case, from one intent to the next, we really can see very different approaches succeeding. Another customer use case that we tend to emphasize a lot, which is kind of similar to the EPCOR one in its simplicity, is a customer we worked with it was basically a two-step process. Step one, give us your member ID, which was an alphanumeric. Step two, tell us your name, which we already know from that first step. And so I've done a number of presentations on this use case as well. And we saw with using one of the major name vendors that's out there on that first step with the member ID, really bad recognition rates, less than 80%. And then on the second step with the name, even worse. And we like this because it emphasizes, even though it's pretty simple, it emphasizes the need for different vendors, but also the ways in which different vendors can succeed. Because solving the first problem around the alphanumerics, we found worked by using a grammar, which is essentially around limiting the domain of what people can say. That allowed us to vastly improve performance there. When we found using Watson for that was very effective. They have very good support for grammars. On the other side, with the first name and last name, that's not really about the model. I mean, there's definitely, like, if you're just doing open-ended first name, last name, I don't know who would do the best. No one's going to do particularly well. The key thing there is having a toolkit that allows you to give this hint to the system that says, this is John Kelvie calling. His last name is Kelvie and it's spelled with a K. The system's not going to be able to guess it that otherwise. Humans wouldn't be able to guess it. When I say my name to a bank teller, they say, is that with a K or a C or whatever? And is the V a B or, and is the last part a Y? People don't know how to spell your last name. But if you feed it as a hint, it'll do fantastic. And so we saw a use case that was like at 50% recognition because they were using some immature tooling that didn't support that, unfortunately. That jumps to more than 98% correct recognition. And we did out of grammar testing on it too. Again, not to go into the weeds too much, but it still did well. I mean, if I went and said my name was Monegan instead of Kelvie and it was expecting Kelvie, it knew Monegan was not Kelvie. It didn't make that mistake. It just works so much better. So it's a combination of having the right model, the right tools, and applying that for each intent, which might sound a little bit daunting, but it's not. We really don't think it's very hard. It doesn't take us long to make those sorts of advisories. And it just makes all the difference. I mean, you think about how upset people will be, and if I'm talking to one in this question, I'm sorry, but if you have 50% recognition, your sponsors are pissed. Like this project, I mean, it looks like a dumpster fire, right? It looks really bad. And people are going to say, well, AI doesn't work. Well, it's not true. It just is not the right combination of model and tooling. So that, I mean, we think that that's the right approach. That's the right way to look at it. We love helping customers with those sorts of use cases.
I think that there's some members of the audience today, John, that are a little bit more on the technical side. I wouldn't mind if you put your technologist hat on and play back for the team the great investments the Bespoken team's done with the product to make it compatible and tightly integratable with DevOps pipeline and just kind of the developer friendliness, right? A lot of the quality starts with the developers, who's writing logic, who's and encoding business logic into the AI, informing it with data and taking action based on the actions. They're building real software these days, right? I think the Bespoken team's got a real great mindset for integration into the DevOps loop and helping developers take a test-driven approach to their jobs. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's not necessarily something that we always advertise, because I feel like, we love DevOps. I personally really love DevOps. It's a big part of the reason why we're doing this. It's not something that everybody loves, unfortunately. But we think it's just essential to this. We think, as we were talking about before, that to crack the code on good conversational AI, you really need automated testing. And you need it not just, when you're first implementing, you need it on an ongoing basis. And one thing about automated testing is if you hook it into a good DevOps flow, whatever tooling you provide, like we personally like GitHub at Bespoken, but there's a lot of good tools out there. If you tie that together, and then you tie it into great monitoring pieces, like we use Datadog a lot with our customers, or Splunk, it just works so much better, and you're getting so much more value out of that initial implementation. We think just automated testing for the first go around, we think it adds a lot of value. We're proud of the work we've done where it's kind of one and done, and that has been the case at times. But we love working closely with customers to see, like, it shouldn't just be one and done. Instead, it's part of this ongoing life cycle. It's tightly tied into your development process. Every time you're making changes to your model or your code, you're getting benefit from those functional tests. You're getting benefit from the sort of accuracy testing being run on an automated basis. And just over that entire life cycle, it keeps accruing. You keep getting these benefits, and you're able to really ensure that your system's always working well, and you're able to continue to innovate without this sort of nagging feeling that, gee, what if this change breaks everything? And that can certainly be scary. I mean, on the AI side, I would say, I wish I had a count on it. I would just say it's a lot. Like the number of customers we talked to were like, well, we changed one utterance on an intent that we thought was unimportant, and it broke everything. We've routinely heard that from folks. That's a terrible feeling. And we're happy to report that we have a cure for that, and it is automated testing.
I think we may be at the end of the questions here, John. Maybe we should declare success.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you everyone for joining us. We enjoy doing this webinar. We do plan on doing future ones. We have sort of a whole timetable that we'll be publishing on that. So we hope that that you'll join us for those additional ones. And we also just, we'll provide a recording on this. And we welcome any feedback on it, either content that you want to see us provide, or if you take issue with anything that I said or that Mike said, if you think that we're way off base, let us know. Mike and I both love to talk, so feel free to chat with us, and we'll be happy to, to engage. So, though I do see. Somebody ask a question?
It's Fiore saying thank you for joining us.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And hopefully we'll be seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.